My name is Adrian Cole, and I'd been living with my roommate, Marcus Chen, for exactly 8 months and 13 days. Not that I was counting. Okay, maybe I was counting. But not for the reasons you might think. Let me back up. The apartment hunt had been brutal. New York City has a way of humbling you, making you realize that your dreams of a spacious loft with exposed brick are laughable on a junior graphic designer's salary. I'd been scrolling through listings that looked like glorified closets when I stumbled upon Marcus's ad. Creative professional seeking responsible roommate. Must love plants, late-night conversations, and respecting boundaries.
Something about those words felt right.
Safe, maybe. Or at least honest. Our first meeting was at a coffee shop in Williamsburg, one of those places with mismatched furniture and baristas. It looked like they were auditioning for indie films. Marcus arrived exactly on time, which I appreciated immediately. He was taller than I expected, with dark hair that fell just slightly into his eyes, an easy smile, and hands that moved expressively when he talked. "Oh, Adrian," he'd said, wrapping his fingers around a ceramic mug of black coffee, "tell me something real. Not the rehearsed roommate interview stuff. Something that matters to you." I remember being taken aback. Most people asked about cleaning schedules and rent splits. "I collect old vinyl records," I'd said. "Not because they sound better or because it's trendy, but because my grandmother used to play them every Sunday morning while making pancakes. When I listen to them now, I can almost smell the kitchen. Cinnamon and maple syrup." Marcus had smiled. Not the polite smile people give when they're trying to be nice, but something genuine that reached his eyes. "I get that," he'd said. "I paint at 3 in the morning sometimes. It's the only time my mind quiets down enough to let the colors through." We moved in together 2 weeks later. Living with Marcus was easier than I'd anticipated. He was neat without being obsessive, considerate without being overbearing. He left notes on the frigid little reminders written in his distinctive handwriting that always made me smile. "Bought more coffee? You're welcome. Or if you eat my leftover pad thai, we're going to have words." But there was something else. Something I didn't want to name. I noticed things about him. The way he hummed while making breakfast. How he always wore this particular gray hoodie when he was feeling anxious. The sound of his laugh, rich and unguarded, when he was on the phone with his sister. The constellation of freckles on his left shoulder that I'd glimpsed once when he'd walked shirtless from the bathroom. I told myself it was just observation. Just the natural process of getting to know someone you live with. I'd dated women before, had a long-term girlfriend in college, and never questioned my orientation. I was straight. I'd always been straight, except lately when Marcus smiled at me over morning coffee. My heart did this weird stuttering thing that felt decidedly not straight. I pushed the thoughts away, built walls. Kept things friendly, but distant. Marcus seemed to respect those boundaries, though sometimes I caught him looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Curiosity, maybe, or something deeper. We never talked about our dating lives. It was an unspoken rule, part of that careful choreography roommates perform to maintain harmony. I didn't ask about the occasional overnight guest he had, a tall guy with an architectural portfolio who stayed over twice. Marcus didn't ask about my absence of dates, or why I spent most. Friday nights alone with a book. It was easier that way. Safer October in New York has its own kind of magic. The city sheds its summer skin and wraps itself in amber and crimson. That particular Tuesday had been long a demanding client, a missed subway connection, and a coffee spill on my favorite jacket. By the time I trudged up our building's stairs, all I wanted was a hot shower and maybe some mindless television. The apartment was quiet when I unlocked the door. Marcus had mentioned something about working late on a commission piece, so I assumed I had the place to myself. I should have knocked on his bedroom door, should have announced my presence, should have done literally anything other than what I did, but I heard music something. Classical and haunting drifting from his room, and the door was slightly ajar. I thought maybe he'd left it open by accident, that he wasn't home after all. I pushed the door open gently, intending to close it properly, and then I froze. Marcus stood in the center of his room, illuminated by the warm glow of string lights he'd hung across the ceiling. He wasn't aware of me yet. He was painting, his back partially turned, wearing nothing but a pair of low-slung gray sweatpants. But it wasn't just that he was shirtless that stopped me in my tracks. It was the painting. On the canvas before him was a figure rendered in stunning, intimate detail. The curve of a spine, the soft shadows of shoulder blades, the vulnerable hollow at the base of a throat. It was beautiful and aching and somehow familiar. And then Marcus turned slightly, reaching for another brush, and I saw his face in profile. His expression was unguarded, almost reverent as he worked. There was something deeply personal in the way he painted, something that felt like witnessing a private conversation between his soul and the canvas. My breath caught audibly. Marcus spun around, his eyes widening when he saw me standing in the doorway. For a moment, neither of us moved. The music continued its melancholy progression. Rain continued its percussion against the windows. "Adrian," he said, his voice rough. "I didn't hear you come in. I'm sorry," I managed. "I should have knocked. I thought you weren't home." He reached for a shirt draped over his chair, pulling it on quickly. But not before I noticed the flush creeping up his neck. "It's okay. I was just working. I should have left. Should have apologized again and closed the door and pretended I hadn't seen anything. But I couldn't stop staring at the painting. It's beautiful," I heard myself say. Marcus's hand stilled on the hem of his shirt. "Thank you. It's the person you're painting," I continued, my voice oddly distant in my own ears. "They must be important to you." Something flickered across Marcus's face, vulnerability, fear, hope, all tangled together. He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Then, so softly I almost missed it. "Yeah, he is." The pronoun hung in the air between us. He, not she. He. I knew I should leave. Every instinct screamed at me to step back, close the door, preserve the safe distance we'd maintained for 8 months. Instead, I heard myself ask, "Can I see it?" The painting, I mean. Closer. Marcus hesitated, then nodded slowly. He stepped aside, giving me space to enter his room, his private sanctuary that I'd only glimpsed in passing before. I moved toward the canvas, my heart hammering against my ribs. Up close, the painting was even more affecting. Each brushstroke was deliberate, loving. This wasn't just technical skill. This was emotion translated into color and form. "Who is he?" I asked, though part of me already suspected. Already knew. Marcus came to stand beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Someone I can't have," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I turned to look at him then. Really look at him. His dark eyes were fixed on the painting, but there was a tension in his jaw, a guardedness in his posture that told me this conversation was costing him something. "Why can't you have him?" The question escaped before I could stop it. Marcus's laugh was hollow. "Because he's my roommate." "Because he's straight?" "Because even if he wasn't, I value our friendship too much to risk it on something as selfish as..." He trailed off, shaking his head. The world tilted. "Marcus," I said, my voice strange and thick. "Look at me," he did, reluctantly, and I saw everything written plainly in his expression. The longing, the resignation, the careful hope he was trying desperately to suppress. "Is that..." I gestured to the painting, my hand unsteady. "Is that supposed to be you?" Marcus finished, his voice cracking slightly. "It's you, Adrian. It's always been you." The tension thickens as Adrian confronts feelings he's been suppressing, and Marcus's secret comes to light. What will Adrian do with this revelation? Can their friendship survive this confession? Time seemed to suspend itself in that moment. The rain outside intensified, becoming a roar against the window panes. Marcus's breathing was audible in the charged silence. Quick and shallow, like he'd just run a marathon. I should have been shocked. Should have recoiled, made an excuse, fled to my room. That's what the Adrian from 2 months ago would have done. The Adrian who had everything figured out, who had his identity neatly labeled and filed away. But standing there, looking at Marcus's face, Beautiful and terrified and hopeful all at once, I felt something inside me crack open. "How long?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Marcus's laugh was bitter, self-deprecating. "You remember that first day? At the coffee shop? When we met about the apartment, I knew then." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as his tell when he was anxious. "You walked in wearing this ridiculous scarf way too warm for September, and you had paint on your thumb. Blue paint. And when you smiled at the barista, I thought I'd never seen anything so genuine." My mind reeled. 8 months. He'd been feeling this for 8 months, living with it, hiding it. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "Because you're straight, Adrian." The words came out sharp, almost angry. "Because you talked about your ex-girlfriend. Because I'd rather have you as a friend and roommate than lose you completely by making things weird. And the painting." Marcus turned back to the canvas, his expression softening into something tender and sad. "Sometimes the feelings get too big to keep inside. I thought if I could put them here on canvas, maybe I could contain them, control them. Stupid, right?" "It's not stupid," I said automatically. Then, more honestly, "I don't know what it is, but it's not stupid." Marcus looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the exact moment hope flickered in his eyes. "What are you saying?" I didn't know. That was the terrifying part. Everything I thought I understood about myself felt like it was written in sand, and the tide was coming in. "I'm saying I need to think," I managed. "I'm saying this is a lot." The hope in Marcus's eyes dimmed, replaced by resignation. "Of course. I'm sorry." "I shouldn't have, don't," I interrupted. "Don't apologize for feeling what you feel." "And what do you want me to do, Adrian?" There was frustration in his voice now, mixed with hurt. "Pretend this conversation never happened? Go back to being the friendly roommate who keeps his distance?" "I don't know." The words burst out of me, louder than I intended. "I don't know what I want, Marcus. Do you know how confusing this is? I've spent my entire life believing I was one thing, and now you're standing here. And I can't stop looking at you, and I don't understand what that means." The confession hung between us, raw and unfiltered. Marcus's eyes widened. "You can't stop looking at me?" I felt heat flood my face. "That's what you're focusing on?" "Yeah," he said, taking a step closer. "Yeah, Adrian, that's what I'm focusing on. Because I've spent 8 months being careful not to stare, not to touch you for too long when we're passing in the hallway, not to imagine what it would feel like to." He cut himself off, pressing his lips together. "To what?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. Marcus's gaze dropped to my mouth, then back to my eyes. "To kiss you." Then started again, triple time. "I should go," I said. But I didn't move. "You should," Marcus agreed. But he stepped closer. We stood there, inches apart, the air between us electric with possibility and fear. I could smell his collen something, cedar and citrus that I'd grown to associate with home. Could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Could feel the warmth of his breath. "Adrian," he said, my name a question and a prayer. And then, before I could overthink it, before I could talk myself out of it, I closed the distance between us. Kissing Marcus was nothing like I'd imagined. Actually, that's a lie. I'd imagined it. Late at night, when I couldn't sleep, in the shower, when I was supposed to be thinking about work, while making coffee in the morning, watching him read the news on his phone, I'd imagined it and felt guilty for imagining it and told myself it didn't mean anything. But the reality was so much more than my imagination. Could have conjured. His lips were soft but certain. He tasted like the mint tea he always drank while painting. His hands came up to cup my face, gentle and reverent, like I was something precious, something breakable. I felt myself melt into the kiss, into him. My hands found his waist, pulling him closer. And he made this small sound in the back of his throat that sent electricity down my spine. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against mine. "Tell me I'm not dreaming," he whispered. "If you are." "Then I am too," I said. We stood like that for a moment, just breathing together, processing what had just happened. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted quietly. I don't know what this means or what happens next. Marcus pulled back just enough to look at me. We don't have to figure it all out tonight. We can take this slow. I've been lying to myself, I interrupted, the words spilling out in a rush. For months, maybe longer. I told myself I was just being a good roommate, that I just appreciated having you around. But the truth is, I think about you constantly. I wait for you to come home. I listen for your laugh. I find excuses to be in the same room as you. Marcus's thumb traced along my jawline, sending shivers through me. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was scared, I confessed. Because accepting that I might be, I faltered on the word, still unable to say it. Bisexual, Marcus supplied gently. Pansexual? Queer? Gay? Any or none of the above? I don't know, I said, feeling tears prick at my eyes. I don't know what label fits. All I know is that when I look at you, something in my chest feels too big for my body. Marcus smiled, soft and understanding. Labels can wait. You don't owe anyone a tidy explanation, Adrian, not even yourself. The compassion in his voice nearly undid me. I'd been so afraid of judgment, of confusion, of not having the right words. But Marcus wasn't asking for any of that. What if I mess this up? I asked. What if I'm not ready? What if he kissed me again, tender and brief? Then we'll figure it out together. If you want to, I do, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I really do. I didn't sleep in Marcus's room that night. We both agreed that was moving too fast, that we needed to process everything that had happened. But I did stay for a few more hours. Sitting on his bed while he told me about the first time he realized he was attracted to men, about coming out to his family during college, about the fears and doubts he'd navigated, I listened. Grateful for his honesty, seeing him in a new light, not as just my roommate, but as someone who'd traveled a path I was only beginning to walk. When I finally retreated to my own room around midnight, I lay awake for hours, my mind replaying the evening on an endless loop. The painting, the confession, the kiss. I touched my lips, still able to feel the ghost of his touch. Something fundamental had shifted in me, like tumblers in a lock finally clicking into place. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and something baking. Padding into the kitchen, I found Marcus pulling a tray of blueberry muffins from the oven. He looked up when he heard me. And for a moment, uncertainty flickered across his face. Morning, he said carefully. Morning, I replied, my heart racing. I made muffins, he said, stating the obvious. I stress bake. It's a thing. I moved closer, drawn to him like gravity. Marcus. He set down the tray, wiping his hands on a towel. Yeah, I haven't changed my mind, I said. About last night? About wanting to try this, relief washed over his features. Yeah. I closed the distance between us, wrapping my arms around him in a hug that felt like coming home. Marcus held me tight, his face buried in my neck. I was terrified you'd wake up and regret it, he admitted. I'm terrified of a lot of things, I said honestly. But this isn't one of them. Not anymore. We stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other in the morning light streaming through our kitchen window. So what now? Marcus asked, his voice muffled against my shoulder. Now we eat muffins, I said, pulling back to smile at him. And then maybe you can tell me more about that painting. Marcus's cheeks flushed. It's actually part of a series, he admitted. I have about 6 others hidden in my closet. 6 paintings of me? I asked, oddly touched. Of moments with you, he corrected. You reading on the couch? You laughing at something on your phone? You making breakfast? I couldn't help myself. I kissed him then, soft and sweet, tasting sugar and promise. I want to see them all, I said. I want to know everything. All the moments you noticed. All the things you felt. Marcus smiled against my lips. That might take a while. Good, I said. We have time. The next few weeks were a study in navigation. We moved carefully around each other, learning this new dynamic while preserving the friendship that had always been our foundation. Some things stayed the same. We still watched terrible reality TV together on Thursday nights. Still left each other notes on the fridge. Still had our morning coffee routine. But other things changed in beautiful ways. Marcus held my hand while we watched movies. I kissed him goodbye before leaving for work. We stayed up late talking, sharing stories and fears and dreams we'd never voiced before. I started doing my own research, reading articles, listening to podcasts, joining online forums. Not to find a label that fit perfectly, but to understand the landscape of my own heart. I learned that sexuality could be fluid, that attraction didn't always follow neat categories, that identity was a journey, not a destination. I told my best friend Jenna over coffee one Saturday afternoon. She listened patiently as I stumbled through the explanation, then smiled and said, "Adrian, I've known you were into Marcus since you called me drunk and spent 20 minutes. Describing his aesthetic choices and vintage band tees." "I did not," I protested weakly. "You absolutely did," she said, squeezing my hand. "And I'm happy for you. You both deserve this. Not everyone was as understanding." My mother struggled when I told her, asking questions that felt like accusations, worrying about what the neighbors would think. It hurt, but Marcus was there, reminding me that her journey to acceptance was hers to take, not mine to manage. "You're not responsible for making everyone comfortable with who you are," he said one night. After a particularly difficult phone call with my mom, "You're only responsible for being honest with yourself." 2 months into our relationship, things were good. Better than good. I'd started thinking of Marcus not just as my boyfriend, but as my person, the one I wanted to tell everything to, the one whose opinion mattered most. But I'd be lying if I said it was easy. There were moments of doubt. Times when I caught myself wondering if I was really bisexual or if I was just Marcosexual. Nights when I worried that I wasn't queer enough, that I didn't fit into LGBTQ+ spaces, because I'd come to this realization so late. Marcus was patient with my spiraling thoughts, but I could see it wearing on him too. The constant reassurance I needed. The questions I asked repeatedly. Am I doing this right? Do you really want this? What if I'm just confused? Things came to a head on a Friday night in December. We'd been invited to a party hosted by one of Marcus's friends from art. Schooler, queer holiday gathering in a loft in Bushwick. I'd been anxious about it all week. What if I don't fit in? I'd asked Marcus while getting dressed. "Adrian, you'll be fine," he'd said, adjusting his collar in the mirror. "These are good people, welcoming people." But at the party, surrounded by people who seemed so confident in their identities, who spoke a language of queer culture and history I barely understood, I felt like an imposter. I stood awkwardly by the drinks table while Marcus mingled, laughing with friends, at ease in a way I envied. "You must be Adrian," said a voice beside me. I turned to find a woman with short, platinum hair and kind eyes smiling at me. "I'm Tessa. Marcus has talked about you constantly, he has." I asked, oddly pleased. "He's completely smitten." She took a sip of her drink. "How are you finding the party?" "It's great," I lied. Tessa raised an eyebrow. "You look about as comfortable as a cat in a bathtub." Despite myself, I laughed. "That obvious?" "Little bit," she said kindly. "First queer event. Is it that clear I don't belong here?" "Whoa, stop right there," Tessa said, her voice firm but gentle. "You belong anywhere you want to be. Being queer isn't about how many pride parades you've attended or how well you know queer history. It's about being true to yourself. And from what Marcus tells me, you're doing exactly that." Her words settled something in me. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Besides," she added with a wink, "half the people here are probably just as nervous as you. We're all just figuring it out as we go." I spent the rest of the evening actually talking to people, sharing stories, listening. And slowly, the anxiety loosened its grip. On the subway ride home, Marcus took my hand. "You okay? You seemed tense earlier." "I was," I admitted. "But Tessa helped. Actually, everyone helped. I think I just needed to realize that there's no right way to be queer." Marcus squeezed my hand. "I wish I could have made that easier for you. I know I sometimes forget what it's like to be figuring all this out for the first time." "It's not your job to make it easy," I said. "This is my journey, You being patient with me is more than enough." "I love you," Marcus said suddenly. I froze. It was the first time either of us had said those words. Marcus's eyes widened, as if he hadn't meant to say it out loud. "Sorry, I love you too," I interrupted, the words feeling both terrifying and completely right. "I've loved you for a while, I think. I was just too scared to say it." Marcus kissed me right there on the subway, and I didn't care who saw. The holidays brought a new challenge. My family. My mother had softened slightly since my initial coming out, but she'd made it clear she wasn't ready to meet Marcus as my boyfriend. My father was more accepting but cautious, worried about how this might affect my life. I'd initially planned to go home to Connecticut alone for Christmas, keeping Marcus separate from that part of my life. But the thought of lying, of pretending to be someone I wasn't, made me physically ill. "What if I just told them I'm bringing you?" I asked Marcus one evening as we decorated our apartment's tiny Christmas tree. He looked up from untangling a string of lights. "Are you sure?" "I don't want to cause problems with your family." "I'm not causing problems," I said firmly. "Me living authentically isn't causing problems. If they can't handle that, it's their issue to work through, not mine." Marcus set down the lights and pulled me into a hug. "You've come so far," he murmured. "I'm proud of you." So I called my mother and told her I was bringing Marcus home for Christmas. As my boyfriend, the silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Mom?" I prompted. "This is still very hard for me, Adrian," she said finally. "I'm trying to understand, but I know it's hard," I interrupted. "But Mom, I love him, and he loves me, and this is who I am. I need you to try, because I can't keep pretending that this part of my life doesn't exist." Another long silence. Then, "What time should we expect you?" It wasn't acceptance. Not quite. But it was a start. Christmas at my parents' house was awkward at first. My mother was polite, but stiff, offering Marcus the guest room and making a pointed comment about boundaries under her roof. My father was warmer, shaking Marcus's hand and commenting on his art portfolio when Marcus nervously showed it to him. My younger sister, Emily, was the real surprise. She pulled me aside on Christmas Eve while Marcus was helping my father with something in the garage. "He's good for you," she said simply. "I've never seen you this settled, like you've finally figured out who you're supposed to be. You're okay with this?" I asked, feeling tears prick my eyes. "With me being with a guy?" Emily hugged me fiercely. "I'm okay with you being happy. That's all that matters." The real turning point came on Christmas morning. We were all gathered in the living room, opening presents, when my mother handed Marcus a small wrapped box. "I didn't know what you liked," she said, her voice uncertain. "But Adrian mentioned you collect vintage fountain pens." Marcus opened the box to reveal a beautiful antique pen, clearly carefully chosen. His eyes went wide. "Mrs. Cole, this is too much," he said, clearly overwhelmed. "It's not enough," my mother said quietly. "I haven't been. I haven't handled this well, but I'm trying. You make my son happy, and that should have been enough for me from the beginning." I watched Marcus blink back tears as he thanked her. Watched my mother's eyes soften as she looked at us together. It wasn't a perfect resolution, we still had work to do. Conversations to have, but it was real progress that night. Lying in the guest room, my mother had relented and let us share. Marcus and I whispered in the darkness. "Your family is lovely," he said. "They're trying," I corrected. "And that's all I can ask for." "Thank you," Marcus said, "for bringing me. For fighting for us." "Thank you for being worth fighting for," I replied, kissing him softly. Spring arrived in New York, with its usual, dramatic, flare-sudden warmth. Trees exploding with blossoms, the city shaking off winter like an old coat. Marcus had an art show opening at a gallery in Chelsea, featuring the paintings he'd been working on for months, including, he'd told me, with a shy smile, the series about me. The night of the opening, I stood in the gallery, surrounded by his work, seeing myself through his eyes. There I was, rendered in oils and acrylic shredding, laughing, sleeping, existing in all the mundane and beautiful moments that made up a life. But the centerpiece was a new painting, one he'd been secretive about, It showed two figures standing in a kitchen. Morning light streaming through a window. They were holding each other, faces pressed together, completely at peace. One figure's hand was tangled in the other's hair. Coffee cups sat forgotten on the counter behind them. It was us. That first morning after our confession, holding each other in the kitchen, the placard beneath it read, "Home." I felt Marcus come to stand beside me, his presence warm and familiar. "What do you think?" he asked nervously. "I think you see me more clearly than I've ever seen myself," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Marcus laced his fingers through mine. "You've given me so much, Adrian. Inspiration, purpose, love. I wanted to give something back." "You've given me myself," I said, turning to face him. "Before you, I was living a half-life, following a script I thought I was supposed to follow. You helped me rewrite it." He kissed me, right there in the gallery, surrounded by our story rendered in color and light. When we broke apart, I noticed people watching us smiling. A year ago, I might have been embarrassed, might have worried about what people thought. Now, I just felt grateful. We're still in the same Brooklyn apartment, though we've redecorated. My vinyl collection sits next to his art supplies in the living room. Our plants there are so many plants, now crowd the windowsills. Some mornings, I wake up and still feel a flicker of surprise that this is my life, that I get to love this person, that he loves me back. We've had our challenges. Moments of doubt, arguments about stupid things like dishes and whose turn it is to buy groceries. But we've also had countless perfect moments, quiet mornings, late-night conversations. His hand in mine as we walk through the city. I've stopped worrying so much about labels. When people ask, I tell them I'm bisexual, though sometimes I say queer, and sometimes I just say I'm Adrian and I'm in love with Marcus. All of those feel true. My mother sends Marcus's birthday cards now. My father asks him about his art. Emily video calls us both for advice about her own life. Marcus's series, About Me, sold every piece except one, the painting titled Home. That one hangs in our bedroom. A reminder of where we started and how far we've come. Last night, as we were falling asleep, Marcus turned to me in the darkness. "Hey, Adrian," he murmured. "Yeah, I'm really glad you walked in that night." When I was painting, I smiled into his shoulder. Me too. Even though I nearly had a heart attack. "Best accidental intrusion ever," he said. Kissing my forehead. "Best roommate ever," I replied. "Boyfriend," he corrected. "Partner," I countered. "Soulmate," he suggested, his voice playful but sincere. I pulled him closer. "Yeah, that works too." Outside, the city hummed its eternal song. Inside, wrapped in Marcus's arms, I was home, not because of the apartment or the neighborhood or the city, but because I'd finally found my way back to myself. And found someone who loved every version of Mitha, confused one, scared one, the brave one, the authentic one. Sometimes the best surprises are the ones that change everything, that break you open and rebuild you into someone more whole than you were before. I walked in on my roommate painting one rainy October night. And what happened next surprised me. It surprised me with its tenderness, its truth, its absolute undeniable rightness, and I wouldn't change a single moment.